Luke chapter 20, beginning at verse 19. The scribes and the chief priests sought to lay hands on him at that very hour, for they perceived he had told this parable against them, but they feared the people. So they watched him and sent spies who pretended to be sincere, that they might catch him in something. He said, so as to deliver him up to the authority and jurisdiction of the governor. So they asked him, "Teacher, we know that you speak and teach rightly and show no partiality, but truly teach the way of God. Is it lawful for us to give tribute to Caesar or not?" But he perceived their craftiness and said to them, "Show me a denarius. Whose likeness and inscription does it have?" They said, "Caesar's." He said to them, "Then render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." And they were not able in the presence of the people to catch him in what he said, but marveling at his answer, they became silent. There came to him some Sadducees, those who deny that there is a resurrection. And they asked him a question, saying, "Teacher, Moses wrote for us that if a man's brother dies, having a wife but no children, the man must take the widow and raise up offspring for his brother. Now there were 7 brothers. The first took a wife and died without children, and the second and the third took her, and likewise all 7 left no children and died. Afterwards the woman also died. In the resurrection, therefore, whose wife will the woman be? For the 7 had her as wife." And Jesus said to them, "The sons of this age marry and are given in marriage, but those who are considered worthy to attain to that age and to the resurrection from the dead neither marry nor are given in marriage, for they cannot die any more, because they are equal to angels and are sons of God, being sons of the resurrection. But that the dead are raised, even Moses showed in the passage about the bush, where he calls the Lord the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Now he is not the God of the dead, but of the living, for all live to him." Then some of the scribes answered, "Teacher, you have spoken well," for they no longer dared to ask him any question.
Last year, Beth and I enjoyed watching a particular TV series that we didn't really expect to enjoy. It's a TV show that it was a drama series all about chess. I can't play chess. I'm not intelligent enough. A TV series was called Queen's Gambit, and I think we've got a couple of pictures. I might help you get it. Oh, there you go, a little bit. So it's a story of a girl who's orphaned quite early on in life, ends up in an orphanage, and she eventually enters into the sort of male-dominated world of professional chess, winning championships and becoming a grandmaster in the sort of 50s, 60s America. She sort of discovers chess while she's in an orphanage, as she sort of makes her way down to the basement where the caretaker is, and starts playing chess with him, and her sheer ability, her giftedness just becomes obvious. And at one stage, this caretaker brings in the local chess club manager, brings her in to assess the talent. He's sort of trained her and taught her, taken her as far as he can, and he wants this sort of next level up guy to check out her skills. And as she demolishes this guy, just that sort of very young age, then they come up with an idea where she can come to the chess club that's hosted in the school, and rather than just playing everybody at chess sort of consecutively, she'll play the room. So they sort of set the room up in a bit of a square with all these different lads that are around the room, and she'll play a piece, make a move, and then she'll just move on to the next game. And she'll play them all in her head as she goes around the room. All of these people trying to break her, trying to beat her. She enters his room. There's a look of smugness and superiority on all these lads and boys. And she walks around and defeats all of them. Her raw brilliance is just on display. They're unable to touch her, unable to lay a finger on her. Despite all their cunning, all their strategy, all their skill, all of their experience, they can't get near them. She dominates them. It's a great scene. And there's a similar scene here in Luke 20, though the stakes are a little higher. Jesus is again entering a room, and it's got opponents in it. But not just opponents, like a chess opponent. These people are his sworn enemies. These people we've heard are out to destroy him. They want his life. Just have a look at the first couple of verses of our passage that Chris read to us, verse 19 and 20. Verse 19, they sought to lay hands on him. They want to get hold of him. He's infuriating them. This is their intention. Their intention is to harm him. Verse 19, they fear the people. They're cowardly in their approach towards him. They want to harm him, but they don't want to come to any harm themselves. If they came out and laid hands on him, if they did what they really wanted to do, then people would lay hands on them. It's part of the tension that's in these chapters. The crowds, the people, are with Jesus. They're hanging on every word of his. And so they're watching him, verse 20. Their eyes are set on him, looking for that opportunity. And then linked to this idea of watching as they send spies. Previously, in chapter 20, verse 1, there was this formal delegation that approached Jesus. Now it's a much more sneaky operation. They're sending spies. There's people planted into this room to look like disciples, to look like followers. Verse 20, they pretend to be sincere, that they might catch him. This is their intent, to get him, to speak to him in such a way that he says words that get him into trouble, to trap him, to ensnare him, to catch him out. If you want to kill someone, it seems a weird approach, doesn't it? Just to play word games with them. If you really want to throttle them, if you really want to crucify them, if you really want them dead and off the scene, it's a strange approach to try and debate them. Why are they doing this? Why is this their approach? Well, they're trying to separate Jesus from the masses. They're trying to separate him from the people, and they're also trying to perhaps alienate him with the Roman authorities. They're hoping that the words that he uses will get him into trouble. The words that he uses will be the golden ticket to lay a charge on him. That they can go to the court and say, he said this. He's this type of guy. He's stirring this up. Or they can go to the crowds and say, he isn't really the Messiah. Look, he's saying this sort of thing. And so these debates count. Jesus is in this hostile environment. He's approached by these spies, and they ask him, Teacher, we know that you speak and teach rightly and show no partiality, but truly teach the way of God. Notice how these wicked men speak truth while they lie. It's impressive, isn't it? Look out for those people in life who speak truth while they lie. They're that slippery. They don't believe what they're saying, do they? They're speaking the truth, and we'll come to see that their words are prophetic. They explain effectively the passage that we're about to look at. They don't mean it. It's not genuine. It's not in their heart. Their lives don't line up with their words. This group has learnt no lessons. Jesus just told them in the parable where they starred as villains who were going to kill him, that this is who they are. This is what they're about. This is their evil intent. He's pulled back this curtain of deception and said, well, this is what you're really like. And they haven't taken that warning. They haven't taken that parable to heart. It hasn't changed them. It's caused them to carry on. So in this passage, we're just going to see that there are two different traps that are laid for Jesus by two different groups, one by the set of spies and then later on by a set of Sadducees. We're going to look at them separately, but perhaps to help us just follow the passage through, we're going to ask the same three questions of both traps. Yeah, so two groups approaching Jesus with two different types of trap, but we're going to ask the same three questions to help us navigate those two traps. Here are the three questions. Why are they asking the question? So what's the question all about? What is the thought world about it? That might not seem very relevant to us, might not seem very important to us, so we need to make sure we know what they're talking about. How does Jesus answer that question? And then what does that answer mean for me? Okay? So what's the nub of the question? What's that question all about? How does Jesus answer? And what does that answer mean for me? Because we don't really just want to eavesdrop in this conversation and find out what that conversation was about. No, we really believe, and we've just sung, asking the Lord to speak to us through his word. So we want, as we do eavesdrop on this conversation and try and understand it, apply it to us. And it does seem like a world away, doesn't it? Sadducees. Who are they? Denarii, denarius, coins, Roman coins. What's that all about? Marrying 7 consecutive brothers. It seems a million miles away, so we need to work to bring this home to us. So let's have a look at the first one. This is a trap about tribute. A trap about tribute. Here's the question they end up asking after their slipperiness. Verse 22, is it lawful for us to give tribute to Caesar or not? Let's go for our first question then. Why are they asking this question? The question is designed to put Jesus in a really tricky, sticky position. If you answer yes, you're saying a great big yes to Rome. You're saying yes to Rome. I vote for Rome. I'm surrendering my support. I'm surrendering my money in support of Caesar. If you say yes, you line up with Rome. And you surrender your Jewishness, your Israelness in subjection to Rome. There would have been those in Jewish society that objected to Roman rule, that thought the real cause of the people was to overthrow this power. Zealots, to fight back, to get swords, and to literally fight, to take up arms against their oppressors. So by no means give them money, by no means support them, by no means part with your hard-earned cash to prop up Caesar, but rather take a sword and try and stab him. That's really what the Jewish people should be doing. This group would surely reject Jesus as Messiah if he says yes to this, if he lines up with Rome. He's not their man. If you answer no, then you're aligning yourself with this group. You're stoking up their fires. You're a threat to Rome. If you say, no, don't be paying any taxes to Caesar, then you're making yourself a revolutionary. You're making yourself an agitator. The crowds have already warmed to Jesus. They've welcomed him into this city as their king. And if he now says at this pivotal moment, don't be paying any taxes to Rome, then he's stoking those fires of revolution. Very easy then for these questioners to report back Jesus' revolutionary ideas and hand him over to these authorities. That's their plan. So can you see how live these issues of the day were? What question might Jesus be posed today? Have you had your vaccine, Jesus? Are you pro-vax or anti-vax? That'd be the question of today, wouldn't it? That's one of the things that's dividing up our society, dividing up our culture. Pro-vaccine or anti-vaccine? Where would he be? You opt one way and you align with a certain group of people. You opt the other way and you align with another group of people. Remember, the motive of these people is to hand Jesus over. And so that's what their question is really all about. That's what they're heading to. Their words are heading towards handing Jesus over to people who will harm him and hurt him. Jesus at present is no threat to Rome, and he has the people's support. So this question is trying to push him one way or the other, either away from the people, so as people can come back towards these Jewish authorities, or away from Rome. Towards Rome. Okay, so that's the question. That's why they're asking it. Hopefully you can see something of the pickle that question puts Jesus in. So let's look at how he answers it. Show me a denarius. I think we've got one. Have a look at. There you go. There's one. And Jesus says, whose likeness and inscription does it have? They said, Caesar's. He said to them then, this dog is on timer, isn't he? About 5 minutes into every sermon, he just starts barking. Got a pagan dog. Get an air gun. All right. Oh, my dog's bigger. Right, anyway. So, show me a denarius. Whose likeness and inscription does it have? They said, Caesar's. He said to them, then render to Caesar, or give to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. Jesus answers it so brilliantly, doesn't it? It's so simple. You read it the first time and you think, oh, there's no problem. But there was a problem, wasn't there? There was a real pickle that he was in. Something about the brilliance of Jesus' answer is just so simple and so straightforward. This is the national pickle that the whole of Israel is in. What are we supposed to do with this conundrum? And the great conundrum is thrown to Jesus and he just goes, give me a coin. Even the question, give me a coin, gets him halfway there. Halfway to answering the conundrum. You've already got the coin in your pocket. It's already in circulation. You're already using it. You're already benefiting from it. You're already enjoying the benefits that come from having those coins in your pocket. You're part of this empire. You're enjoying the protection. Yes, suppression to a degree, but protection too of Rome. As they look at the coin, Jesus asks them this very simple question. Whose image is on the coin? Whose name's on it? It's Caesar. Caesar's face, Caesar's name. It's his. The coin you have in your possession is his. And Caesar wants his coin back? Caesar requires something for you? Well, give it to him. It's so simple, isn't it? So straightforward, and yet there's profound lessons here too. You benefit from Rome. It's an empire and a system that you are a part of. Part and parcel of that system is taxation. And Jesus manages not to fudge the question. How many politicians, particularly the last couple of weeks, have we listened to fudging questions? I'm not 100% sure what the context was, but I saw a little clip of someone being asked, have you spoken to Boris Johnson this week? Why? What? Just answer the question. I've had communications with Boris Johnson. Have you spoken to Boris? I've had communication. What are you doing? Just answer the question. And Jesus does. It's a difficult question. It's a question that puts you in a pickle, but he gives a straight answer to it. And yet he does so in a way that doesn't allow him to land really on either of the two sides that were a threat to him. He's clear, unequivocal. He's straight. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's. Pay your taxes. Recognize the sovereignty of God that's placed these leaders over you. He's not pleading, though, for their support, is he, or favor? He doesn't need Rome's backing. He's not catching up to Rome so they'll protect him and look after him. He's got no political aims in sight. It's just how it is. There's something so refreshing about Christ's answer, so straightforward. The slipperiness, the duplicity of the lies that were coming his way, and he's just so straight in dealing back. He's pure, isn't he? Pure of heart towards those he speaks of, pure of mind, and that means his answers can be honest as well as wise. Jesus is all of these things because he's got an altogether different outlook on life here on earth. And that outlook is seen in the second part of the answer. And give to God the things that are God's. It begs the question, what's God's? Everything. Everything is God's. A great question in your life isn't tax or no tax, vaccine or no vaccine, Labour or Conservative, leave or remain. The great question in life is, do I know God? Do I fear him? Or am I in relationship with him? All of the other questions, as important as they might be in their own place, pale into insignificance when that is the great question. Am I living for him? Do I know him? Some of the writers, the commentators that I've read this week pick up on this language of image and likeness, and they draw that parallel then that the image and likeness that we're in is in God's image and likeness. We're stamped by him. And so now made in his image, we're to give God what is his. We are his. All of us, body, soul, and mind. We're to give ourselves back to him. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's. Give to God what is God. Give everything. Give your devotion. Give your heart. Give your worship. Give your life to him. So Jesus made this great question of the day small in comparison to the great spiritual significance of walking obediently with God. Again, just to repeat it, it's not complicated. It's simple truth. Profound, that cuts through all the lies and the cunning and the slipperiness of sin. I was on the phone to Steve this week. I said, I feel like I've preached the same sermon about 7 times in a row. I keep talking about responses to Jesus and rejecting Jesus. And they're the passages that we're in. So I don't apologize for that. It's just part of going through. But I want these messages also to be fresh and to come across fresh. And perhaps you've thought, as you've been listening to messages about rejection, well, I don't reject Jesus. Jesus is my Savior. I follow him. Well, Jesus is marching here into Jerusalem as king. And so what does that following look like in your life? To have a king that you're following. It means being obedient to his word. And he says lots of things in his word. Love your neighbor. Love your enemies. Forgive those who hurt you. Don't neglect meeting together. Forgive one another. There's loads of searching instructions in God's word, and we can be a bit like those chaps at the beginning. We can be slippery with our words. We can give praise to God with our lips, but really our lives are really out of sync with true obedience to who Christ is. And so we'd never say we were rejecting God and his authority. We'd never say we were rejecting Christ, but in all sorts of areas, there can be these areas where we're just ignoring him. Jesus' words cut through that. Simplicity and purity. Thirdly, then, what does the answer mean for me? Well, just consider him. Consider Christ. As I've always called her Queen's Gambit. Queen's Gambit apparently is a move in chess, but I could never remember her name. So because the show was called Queen's Gambit, I kept on calling her Queen's Gambit, and sorry, I can't remember her name. So as Queen's Gambit walks around this room and destroys all these people, you see the smugness just change to adoration. What's so lovely about this, the sort of arc of the series is, although she's walking into a very male-dominating setting, how welcoming so many of these men are. And they're absolutely smashed by her and destroyed by her in her ability. And they become her supporters and they become her coaches and they get around her. Now, some people dislike her and, their pride is dented. But for the majority, she's welcomed. We want something of that response to Christ here. As we see someone who is untouchable and no one can lay a finger on him. We want to gasp. We want to stop and consider. We want our mouths to stop. He's untouchable in his wisdom. He's uncompromising in his truth-telling. Luke is building his case. Christ's innocence is going to become important over the next couple of chapters. He's innocent. We're going to be told by numerous people that he's innocent. Now, the things that they're going to lay on him, he's not guilty of. And we're also seeing in these episodes that Christ is in complete control. These things don't faze him. They don't prevent him from what he's about to do. The dark depravity of these destructive minds is no match for his righteous purity. They can't land a finger on him. Christ is untouchable. Don't just consider Christ, but consider his kingdom. Notice too how otherworldly Christ's kingdom is. In one sense, he's no threat to Rome. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's. Give him what he's required. I'm not here to mess with any secular authorities. I'm not here to cause any real revolution. In another sense, Rome is no threat to Christ. He's not intimidated by it. He's not overawed by it. Rome and Christ's kingdom are on different planes altogether. Jesus won't have his movement put into a little political box. He's on God's business. Sure, pay your taxes, but first get the main thing right. Walk with God. Honor him. Live for him. A pastor came to speak. We got a fraternal where different pastors in Cardiff get together. And on occasion, different people come to talk to us on different issues. And a pastor from Swansea came to talk to us recently. And he was telling us how thrilled he was to have an anti-vaxxer in his church. How excited he was to have an anti-vaxxer in his church. He said, alongside her, he said, I've got nurses and doctors. So that's great, isn't it? That's what a local church should be all about. People who are different coming together. People who are different have different perspectives and different opinions and strongly held different opinions. Finding something bigger. Finding something greater than them. The kingdom of Jesus was big enough to have room for them all. Look at Jesus' followers. He's got the tax collector and he's got the zealot and his discipleship crew. In the ones that are following him in his close-knit group, he's got two very different characters on opposite ends of the political spectrum. These small lines of division are so good that we're so good at erecting and lifting up and dividing ourselves and cutting ourselves into groups. Well, Jesus stands above them and he calls people from all sorts of persuasions and all sorts of peculiar positions, and he calls them to himself. All classes and colours. He says, come, follow me. Come into my kingdom. Give to God what is God's. Let's move on to the second trap, a trap about resurrection. In verse 27, we're told that these Sadducees come up to him. Sadducees are a different group of Jewish leaders. They are distinct, really, from those other groups by some of their beliefs. Some of their beliefs were a bit strange and a bit different. They didn't believe in the resurrection. The whole sort of spiritual sphere really seems to be something of an anathema to them, something that they're not very keen on. Angelic life as well, they weren't very happy with that as well. So they're sort of part of the leadership group, but they're quite distinct as well and quite different. They've got their own sort of ideas. And yet they're united against Jesus. They're another group setting a trap out for him. So why are these chaps? Why are they asking the question? Let's go through those same three questions. Why are they asking this question? This trap is more of a puzzle. The last one was a pickle, wasn't it? Putting Jesus in a corner, you're going to go left or right. This one is more of a puzzle, a bit of a riddle that Jesus is thrown. And a fairly typical riddle, it would seem, for the Sadducees to sort of lay out. This was their sort of trump card. Of course there's no resurrection. Look at this. This is what they would lay out. And so it's based on the law in the New Testament. You need to know that bit. So it was a law that God had given to his people, that if a believing man, if a Jewish man had died, married, but with no child, then his brother would marry the woman. Sounds a bit strange to us, doesn't it? But the provision was both for the woman's protection and provision, that she would be looked after, that she'd have a husband, but also for the continuation of that man, the dead brother's family line. And so the first child that would come from that marriage then would carry on the dead brother's line. So that's the background. That's what you need to know. That was the law. That was the instruction. That's what they're talking about. And so these Sadducees, they don't believe in the resurrection. That's another key bit for you to need to understand about them. Luke tells us that. And so they're trying to use a bit of the Bible, take a bit of the Bible that everybody knows, and to use it to prove that the resurrection is a false idea. They create this absurd situation where 7 successive brothers in turn marry this same woman. So she marries brother number 1. He dies. And then brother number 2 marries her. He dies. Brother number 3, all the way to brother number 7, who then dies. And here's their crux. Here's their chess move to get Jesus in the corner. At the resurrection, there's a resurrection that they don't believe in. At the resurrection then, which of these men will she be married to? She's now, during her earthly life, had 7 husbands. So who's she going to be partnered with? Who's God going to put her with in the resurrection? Now remember, they don't believe the resurrection will happen, so they think this sort of setup, this absurd setup that they put together proves it. Of course the resurrection couldn't happen. What would happen in this circumstance? And so they think that this thought experiment proves how illogical resurrection teaching is. So that's the question. That's why they're asking it. How does Jesus answer? Well, Jesus answers by taking all the thrust, all of the power away from their question. Their thrust of their question is that if life continues in a very similar, if not identical way to life on this earth, but Jesus is telling them that the life of the resurrection is an altogether different life. It's a different reality. And so Jesus turns the table. He shows them their ignorance. They've come with a certain degree of snobbery, haven't they? They've come with a certain degree of smugness to Christ. Laid down their trump card. And he's shown up their ignorance. Last night we played a game with stickers on our heads. You might have played that game as well. Put a sticker on your head, someone writes a word on the sticker, and you've got to guess what's written on your head. To my left was my elder brother, so I wasn't ever going to have anything favourable written on my head. My wife, however, had Queen, very suitably had Queen written on her head, and her first question was, am I human? To which I scoffed and laughed at her. I'm ashamed. I scoffed at her and said, look around you, who isn't human? Like, what I was kind of saying was, what a silly question, what a daft question. Of course you're human, everyone's human. Little did I know that I had Dumbo written on my head. Yeah, indeed. How appropriate. I've been so smug. I've been so conceited. I thought I knew. I thought she was being daft. I was looking down on her. I was mocking her. It's horrible, isn't it, smugness? What kind of question is that? And then I've got Dumbo, brilliantly positioned, Dumbo written on my head. So not only does it name me and label me, it's accurate, isn't it? And it defeats what I was saying. We're not all human. Not everyone in the game is human. For instance, I'm not. I'm an elephant. I deserve to look like an idiot. I deserve to have that smugness ripped off and to be laughed at in front of my family. The tables were turned. I didn't know what was written on my head. I was speaking in ignorance, but speaking in a way like I had information, like I had special knowledge. Can you see how I'm just like these Sadducees? And they're just like me, smug, thinking they've got all the answers. And Jesus takes it away. Jesus reveals the Dumbo on their heads. Don't you know what we're talking about when we speak of resurrection? You just think it's more of this? More of the same? All that you're focused on here is a man and his wife, and then in heaven you think that wife's focus is going to be, which of these men am I married to? You think that's the scale of this? That's how narrow and how small this future life that I'm calling you to is all about? These Sadducees presume they know what life is to come is like, but Jesus is teaching them that marriage, like we know it, is not like this in the future. Resurrection life in that sense is different. Not only that, but this life is endless, is without death. Resurrection life is not just more of this life after death, it's a second life. It's immortality. It's life without the impact of death or the prospect of death or the effects of death in our world. It's a new realm of life. If they had even the first hint of what the life Jesus could bring, they wouldn't have even dared ask the question. Their question is so small and narrow, so petty and point-scoring. And Jesus' answer is from a different world. It's from a different dimension. And to add insult to injury, Jesus references our future life and compares it to the angels, something the Sadducees didn't believe in. His point of reference is to an angelic being that God has created that they say doesn't exist. And Jesus completes his answer. He completely trounces them by going back to Moses. The Sadducees would have rejected certain parts of the Bible, so he takes them to a certain part of the Bible which they accept. He goes to their own home ground, and he uses that home ground to destroy them. These writings of Moses they would have been okay with, so he's taking them to his own text and making clear that God is the living God, the life-giving God, the God of the living. We have it in verse 37 and 38. That the dead are raised, even Moses showed in the passage about the bush where he calls the Lord the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob. Now he is not the God of the dead, but of the living, for all live to him. Those God is committed to, he will carry them through death into newness of life. His promises are living, as are his people. So as we come to a close, what does that mean for me? That was the question. That's how Jesus answered it. That's how he destroyed them. Well, I suppose I want to phrase, there's lots of ways we could unpack this to ourselves, but I want to, I suppose, respond to one particular response to Jesus, perhaps more prominent in the youngsters of the room. Jesus is boring. He's boring. I don't want to pay attention to this. I don't want to go to church. I don't want to read my Bible. It's boring. Now, if we've given you that idea as believers, if I've given you that idea as a pastor, I'm sorry. If we've set some sort of example to you that's given you the impression that following Christ is boring, then we've done you a disservice. Read this passage yourself. There's nothing boring about Jesus. Nothing boring about him. He can't be contained or controlled. He's cut in his own line. He's not influenced by these powers and people around him. He doesn't care what the crowds make of him. In a sense, he's a rebel. He's going his own way. He's cutting his own line. But he's not like other sorts of rebels who like to draw lots of attention to themselves. No, he's there serving others. He's there trying to benefit others. He's trying to enlighten others. There's a kindness about him. There's nothing exclusive about him. He's inclusive, wanting people to see, wanting people to know, wanting people to come on board. There's nothing boring about him, and there's nothing boring about his offer. His offer is resurrection life, unending life. His offer is eternal realities which we can't barely begin to imagine now, but starting now. This unending relationship with God beginning here on earth, beginning in this life. Knowing God, walking with him, knowing peace, knowing forgiveness of sins, knowing a cleansed conscience, knowing power to live differently to how our flawed beings exist. I don't deserve such a life, you might be thinking. I don't deserve such a Savior. Well, Jesus uses this language, doesn't he, of worthy, verse 35. But those who are considered worthy to attain that age, only Christ could be considered worthy. And so it's through him we come. We enter into this life, this resurrection life, through the only worthy one. He's made a way for that life to be ours. We enter because of him and by him, by his body and his blood. He makes us worthy. He cleanses us from sin, from smugness, from pride, from anger. And he clothes us with righteousness. In him we die to sin and to this world. And in him we're raised to a new life. A life that is now part of God's family, that's part of his kingdom. And we live that life out in this world. We're necessary giving to Caesar what is Caesar's, but the day is coming when that tribute won't be required. When the only tribute that will be required is to the Son who is on the throne, where we can die no longer because we're equal to angels. Sons and daughters of God. Sons and daughters of the resurrection. Boring? You're having a laugh.